Here's what I think is about to happen with Bitcoin between now and the end of the year. First of all, we are at $112,000 right now, less than 10% from the highest Bitcoin has ever been in history. So we are literally less than 10% from a new all-time high and a new record high. We've been chilling down here at 112,000, 110, 111, 109. We've been chilling down here for weeks now, something called chopsolidation, which is a combination of the word chopping and consolidation, which is what an asset does when it's basically getting used to and adjusted to a different level. It does it on the way up. It also does it on the way down. And it takes time for all the people who want to get on the train and off the train to get on the train and off the train at a different price level. So right now, in the last 24 hours, there was $35 billion of Bitcoin that changed hands at between $110,000 and $112,000 per coin. $35 billion, and most of the last 24 hours included Sunday, which is obviously not a work day, and the market only opened an hour ago, or less than an hour ago, for the stock market. So obviously it's open longer in Asia and in Europe because their time zones are ahead of ours. But regardless, $35 billion. Now, normally during a weekday, it's closer to like $60 or $80 billion changed hands. So at some point, one of two things is going to be true. Either the people willing to sell Bitcoin at $112,000 are going to run out, or the people willing to buy Bitcoin at $112,000 are going to run out, leaving people who either want to buy it and are willing to pay 113, or leaving people who are not willing to pay 112 and are only willing to pay 111. That is the way all supply and demand works. 100% of supply and demand is based on exactly that. It's supply and demand. What price are people willing to pay for an asset? And, if there are more buyers than sellers, or the buyers want more Bitcoin than the sellers want to sell at any given price, the price goes up. If the reverse is true, the price goes down. So my prediction is at some point, could be today, could be a month, could be 2 months, could be who knows. At some point, of course, in the long run, the buyers always outstrip the sellers because Bitcoin is only adopted by 5% of the world. So there's 95% of the world that has not adopted Bitcoin, which means there are way more potential buyers than there are sellers. Because all of the sellers represent 5% of the world population at most, and most of that 5% owns a tiny amount of Bitcoin, like $50 or $200, or such a small amount that they don't have the ability to move the price at all. The 95% of the world that owns zero Bitcoin controls the vast majority of wealth of the world. All of those people need Bitcoin eventually, just like I do, just like Michael Saylor does, just like everybody does, because you need a way to store your time and energy for the future, which is what money does. And the US dollar as money is not working very well for that purpose. And the stock market is at record high valuations right now, which means if you're buying stocks on the stock market, you're paying a higher price per dollar of profit of those companies than has ever been the case in human history. Now, could the stock market keep going up? Well, everything in the short term can keep going up. The question is, what about the long term? Is the stock market massively overvalued? In my opinion, it is. And that results in a massive price correction of the stock market at some point. I certainly would not want my money in the stock market right now, which is why I have 0% of my money in the stock market right now, because I don't want to be exposed to that stock market crash. So stocks, I think are massively overvalued. Bonds have been massively underperforming for the last couple decades now, or at least, 5-10 years. It's been a significant period of time that bonds have just gotten crushed. And the Federal Reserve is about to print a ton of money. So there's a massive, lawsuits over this, Fed governor that was claiming that she was living in multiple places as her primary residence simultaneously to get cheap interest rates. And people have been running around knocking on the doors of places that she claims are her primary residence and finding renters living there. So how's that for the Federal Reserve? So it's just ridiculous stuff. But anyway, the Federal Reserve's about to print a ton of money because when you're 37 trillion in debt, you can't have high interest rates because it means you're paying through the nose to support your debt. And the United States is paying through the nose. We're spending more money on interest payments on the 37 trillion in debt than we are on the entire national defense budget to protect our country, which is really the only function that you could even plausibly claim the federal government ought to be doing, is protecting us from aggressive other nations. But we now spend more on our debt than we do on that, which is absolutely, like ridiculously insane. So my prediction is the buyers outstrip the sellers, the price goes higher, or it'll be some sort of catalyst. A catalyst meaning some sort of trigger, like the Federal Reserve actually starts the massive money printing. They're always, the US dollar's value is always going down, and the total amount of money worldwide is going up. But the question is, what is the speed? And if the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, which there's like a 98% chance, according to prediction markets, that they will cut interest rates, it's either next month or October, it's either September, October, whenever it is. Obviously, that pushes a bunch of US dollars into the system, and they start sloshing around, and those US dollars cause inflation to rise. And anyway, they tend to push the price of Bitcoin way up because everybody tries to get out of the US dollar and into something that's not the US dollar, which is what ultimately triggers hyperinflation. Even though the US dollar is not close to hyperinflating, it is still bad to keep your money in US dollars because they lose value so much. And inflation's creeping up, unemployment's creeping up, and the Federal Reserve's about to print a bunch of money, which means everything's going to get, it means it's going to become even less desirable to not be in Bitcoin. So regardless, whether it's a specific catalyst or whether buyers just, outnumber the sellers and finally people get tired of selling Bitcoin at 110, 111, 112, whatever, the price goes up. So at some point there will be a significant reset. The price will jump from, 112 to 135, 140, something like that. And everybody will be saying, well, now I believe in Bitcoin. Now I'm a true believer. This is exactly what I needed to see. I just needed to see a huge uptick. I needed to see Bitcoin respond to the insanity of the outside world. Now it's time for me to get in. And they're all going to come to me and they're going to say, Joel, I'm ready. The Federal Reserve's printing a ton of money. And I've been watching this thing since $90,000 or $60,000 or $110,000. And now at 140, I'm ready. But of course, they will feel like Bitcoin's expensive. And, they'll be reluctant to buy Bitcoin because they're going to perceive it to be expensive at $140,000. And of course, my judgment is always, hey, it's going to $1 million. So, 120, 110, 140, those are all pretty small numbers compared to $1 million a coin. So if it's going to $1 million a coin in the next 10 years, well, no other asset's going to do that for you. At least no other major asset that doesn't have insane risk. So still seems like a fantastic time to hold Bitcoin. But they're going to say, yeah, but it's expensive, it's expensive, it's expensive. And I'll tell them, well, welcome to the club. Everybody who ever bought Bitcoin thought it was expensive. Every Bitcoin I ever bought felt expensive when I bought it because someone before me bought it for less. And of course, even if you were mining Bitcoin the day it was invented and released on January 3rd of 2009, you were still spending electricity and computational power to make your computer run hot and drive up your electric bill to get Bitcoin that technically was free, but it wasn't free because you had to burn up electricity to get it, which is why it's provably scarce. And you would have thought, why am I burning electricity for something that doesn't even have a price yet? And so a lot of people turned their computers off and did not mine Bitcoin because, Bitcoin did not have a price yet. And it costs electricity to get some. So anyway, so everybody who has ever bought Bitcoin or gotten Bitcoin thought they were getting it expensively. And the truth is, in the long run, every Bitcoin that looked expensive ends up looking cheap in the rearview mirror. But anyway, so those people, they will end up buying Bitcoin at $140,000. Inevitably, Bitcoin will come back and bounce around between 125 and 135 or something like that for a little while. And they will be moping about how the Bitcoin they bought is expensive and they're underwater on their investment. And it's been all of 27 days and they're not rich yet. And what's wrong with Bitcoin? And here we go again. Now, how do I know this pattern will happen? Because it's the pattern from everybody who's ever been onboarded to Bitcoin. They always buy after a big, run up in the price because they use the run up in the price to validate that it's a good asset. What they should do is validate that it's a good asset by researching Bitcoin and understanding Bitcoin. But because people don't have the time to do that or the interest to do that, they use the price as validation. Well, that means they are validated in how awesome Bitcoin is after a run-up in price, which means they're buying after a run-up in price. And when you buy after a run-up in price, then you've got to deal with chop solidation, which is right where we've been for the last month or two, where it chops around at a price lower than its all-time high, still high, I mean, heck, 10% away, less than 10% away from the all-time high. Like, by every other conceivable measure, that's an asset that's doing fantastic. But of course, that's not how people think. People think, yeah, but I bought it at 115 and it's down at 112. It's like, well, when did you buy it? Again, well, 27 days ago. Well, what did you think? Like, no investment is guaranteed to be up in 1 month. Like, what, Bitcoin is the highest it's ever been other than the last 100 days. So if you bought Bitcoin anytime prior to the last 100 days, you're up on your investment. But guess what? There are people who bought it in the last 100 days and they're feeling like, mopey that they're down on their investment. And it's like, it's been 100 days. You could buy more Bitcoin at 110 or 111 or 112. So you don't have to be down on your Bitcoin. You can buy new Bitcoin. And if you bought it at 110,000 yesterday, you're up at 112,000 today. So dollar cost average down, which means buy more at a lower price so that the average price you paid is lower. You can always do that. But anyway, so there will be a catalyst, or the sellers will be outrun by the buyers, something like that. Of course, there could be a dip also. As I've always said about Bitcoin, it goes up and down on its way up. Now, I said up twice and I said down once. So eventually it always goes up because it goes up more than it goes down. But that does not mean it can't go down before it goes up. So if the sellers, if the willingness for people to sell at 112,000 exceeds the willingness of people to buy in the short term at 112,000, then the price will go down. How low could it go? Well, James Check, my favorite Bitcoin analyst, who runs the Check on Chain newsletter for $29 a month, he will tell you exactly, with all of his analysis, the probabilities of Bitcoin dipping to different prices. At the end of the day, he will say, and I will say, nobody knows. Nobody knows what Bitcoin is going to do in the near term. All that matters is the long term. And in the long term, it goes way up. So in the long term, it makes sense to own as much as you can and hold on to it for as long as possible. Because the longer you hold on to it, the higher probability that you are up a higher percent. I mean, it's a really simple formula. It really works that simply. So anyway, I think by the end of the year, there's going to be a bunch of people who wish they had bought more Bitcoin right now. And all of the new people that bought Bitcoin after the next big price rise are going to be exactly where the people are right now who bought Bitcoin in the last 100 days, lamenting the fact that they bought expensive Bitcoin and it's trading slightly below their price. And of course, if they wait just a little bit, if they wait, they'll be way up. Bitcoin is up more than 100% in the last 12 months. So any Bitcoin you owned 1 year ago today has more than doubled in value in the last 12 months. Now, what asset has doubled in value in the last 12 months? That's insane. That's incredible performance. But again, nobody wants to zoom out that far. They want to focus on the Bitcoin they bought 27 days ago. I'm just making that up. I'm just picking a random a random odd number, 27. They all want to focus on the Bitcoin they bought 27 days ago, not the Bitcoin that they bought 1 year ago that has more than doubled. So all of investing is about being patient. All about it, all of the money in investing is in the waiting. That's what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett and all the famous investors say is, look, you make all the money in the waiting. You buy and then you wait, and you make all the money in the waiting. You don't make all the money in the trading. You don't make all the money in the buying and selling. You make it in the waiting, because then the waiting is when the asset has time to go from the price you paid for it to a higher price. And if you wait long enough with an asset that the world really needs, like Bitcoin, because it's money and the world needs money and it's a better money than any money that's ever existed, then you are in a better spot long term. So if I had any US dollars, I don't, because I'm 100% Bitcoin. I own, no stocks, no bonds, and just barely enough US dollar cash that I don't bounce a check to a babysitter or a contractor, because some of them demand, a paper check because they don't know any better. And I can't convince them to take Bitcoin yet, because it's such a new technology that they're just not there yet. So I don't have any US dollars I could buy Bitcoin with. In another 7 days, my, twice a month paycheck will hit, and I will buy Bitcoin in 7 days from now, no matter what the price is. I will absolutely buy it no matter what. But, that's 7 days from now. Right now, I do not have any US dollars I could buy Bitcoin with. If I did, I would buy it at $112,000, and I would be patient. The most I've ever paid for Bitcoin is, I think, $122,000, which has just happened to be the price when one of my paychecks hit. I immediately bought $122,000 Bitcoin with my paycheck. And obviously, I'm 10% down or less. I'm 8%, whatever it is, down on that investment. But I don't care, because I've been buying Bitcoin at all different prices. And if you buy Bitcoin at all different prices long enough, you end up with an average price of what you paid for Bitcoin substantially below the current price. So, in my case, my average price for all the Bitcoin I've ever bought from 2017 to the present is about $35,000. So obviously I've more than tripled my entire net worth because my average price is $35,000 and I've got 100% of my net worth in Bitcoin. So if my average price is 35,000 and I'm 100% exposed, then that means I have more than tripled my entire net worth, other than private company stocks, which are obviously not part of that. But as far as like liquid assets, stocks, bonds, cash, all that sort of stuff, I have more than tripled my net worth. So the same will be true for you at some point. If you buy Bitcoin now at 112,000 and then you buy some more at 118 and more at 126, and at some point in the future it'll be 500,000 per coin, but your average price will be 180,000 per coin. Or if you started accumulating last year, the year before, hopefully your average price will be substantially lower than that. There are a lot of people with a lot of Bitcoin that bought it last year during the 8 months when Bitcoin was between $55,000 and $70,000, and they are in the ballpark of doubled their money over the last 12 months. And they bought a substantial amount in that time frame. So good for them. Double their money in 12 months. And, should 10x their money in less than 10 years. So anyway, that being said, things are pretty quiet right now because anytime Bitcoin's not doing exciting up motions, everybody seems like they immediately lose interest because that's the same with every investment. The moment it's not going up, everybody's like, oh, it's boring. It's boring. Every investment is boring 95% of the time and super exciting like 5% of the time. I mean, the vast majority of the time, Bitcoin is roughly the same price or gone up a little bit or down a little bit. And then every few months, you get these 2, 3, 4 days in a row where it goes up 10 or 20%. And that is where the gains are. The gains are in a very small number of days, every quarter, every other quarter. I mean, it's just, you've got to own as much Bitcoin as you can when those gains happen, because what everybody does is they're like, I'll wait and see if Bitcoin's the real deal. And then it goes up 20%. And they're like, okay, then they buy it. And then they're like, okay, but now I'm underwater. And it's like, well, you could have been up 20%, but they're not up 20% because they actually didn't buy during that chop solidation when it was on sale. So I think Bitcoin's on sale right now. But a lot of people are going to wait for the next huge price rise before they pull the trigger on their next tranche of Bitcoin investment. In my opinion, they should buy more right now. If you're having trouble buying more Bitcoin because of limits in Coinbase or River in the amount that you can buy at one time, do a wire transfer from a bank. Your bank will let you wire transfer, and Coinbase and River both give you instructions on how to do that. And you basically walk into your bank and you say, I want to wire X amount of money to this, and it's your account at Coinbase or River, and that is unlimited. There are no limits on the amount of money that you can wire and subsequently buy Bitcoin. So there are limits if you link a bank account. There are limits, especially if you use a debit or a credit card. Those limits are very low. Linking a bank account typically works a lot better. And typically the limits are high enough if you link a bank account for most people. But if you need a higher amount than your bank account limit, then just set up or do a wire transfer. Go to your bank or go log into the mobile app on your bank or whatever. But you can also just go to a bank branch and they can do a wire transfer to River or Coinbase, and you can buy more Bitcoin. So exciting times are ahead, I believe, between now and the end of the year for Bitcoin. It is just a matter of time, and it is just a matter of patience. And that is the case with every single good investment that has ever existed in the world. Have a great day and a great week, everyone.